How are you doing, my listeners? I am Joe Kuik, and I am staying temporarily at Oklahoma State University as a visiting Fulbright scholar. Now, I am meeting Professor Rimmel, one of the outstanding scholars majored in Soviet or Russian history in the U.S. Recently, she has questioned about the miserable state of North Korea and the reunification of South and North Korea. I am going to ask some questions about her scholarly concerns and some ideas about the issue of the Korean Peninsula. How are you doing, Professor Rimmel?
Well, thank you.
Yes. I am going to ask you some questions. Please answer them briefly. I know that one of your majors is the history of Russia and the Soviet Union. What is the kernel theme you have concentrated on and the reason?
Oh, well, it's an interesting question. I'm focusing on 20th century Soviet history, especially on the Stalin era and the so-called Great Terror of the 1930s. And I'm specifically interested in the views of the people at that time on the violence.
Yes, I understand. The social and political violence was a means to maintain the communist ruling system. I think, if so, what is the difference between the violence and the currently frequent violence in the world?
Yes. That's a very important question. As far as I can see both of the current violence and that historical violence, in the Soviet Union, it was more organized. Certainly one of the questions I'm looking at is how much was ordered from above and how much came from below. And the government certainly caused most of the violence, but they also got people to act on their own. But it was all for a certain goal, however ill-defined and useless in the long run. Whereas most of the violence we see today is more chaotic, and certainly there are planned events, but in the world sense, you have different groups who may claim to be acting from one particular group, but they're non-government actors. They want to disrupt, and in the U.S., I'd say most of the violence is on a very individual level. It's not well organized. So in some ways, it's probably more difficult to counteract today.
Yes. Recently, did you watch a documentary about the miserable state of the North Koreans through PBS?
Yes, I saw some of that, and it was very distressing because it's not the first time this has happened. It's been going on for a long time, and it is incomprehensible to me, how a leader could not only allow this to happen, but cause it. And certainly that is nothing new. Stalin, of course, did the same thing. And although I don't think that the famine there in the 1930s was specifically ordered, it happened, and it was a consequence of government policies. And the fact that it's still happening today is extremely distressing. And especially when you see the leaders, the current leader today, Kim Jong-un, is kind of, fat, and then when everybody's starving. And actually the same issue occurred in the Soviet Union. One of the people I write about is Sergei Kirov, and you can see he's got a little tummy there too. And when they were starving in the Soviet Union, they would make bitter jokes about him. And I think it's probably the same, but certainly for the leadership to live so well and while their people are dying is just atrocious.
Yeah. The North Korean regime has been continued to a third generation period. As you said, through the reality that the tyrant harshly deals with his people, I can imagine Stalin or the Soviet Union. How and under what circumstances do you think that the North Korean regime will fall?
Oh yeah, well it would seem that with what's happening today, would be an occasion for it to fall because so many people are angry. But if they're that hungry, they don't yet have the strength to protest. And there are many similarities with the Stalin regime. But one thing that's really different in Korea is that it appears that Kim Il-sung, himself a strong leader, established a dynasty. So his son, Kim Jong-il, and then when he died, the current one ruling. And that's quite different. Even Stalin, he didn't think his sons were, he thought they were kind of worthless and
Yes.
would not let them get any power. So the fact that it's a dynasty, I mean, it may have more to do with Korean family values. I don't know. I think that makes it a little more difficult, but makes it a little more difficult to predict how this is going to happen. But I think as more and more people manage somehow to escape, go to China, and get word out, then hopefully there'd be some way for things to end. But I think the army, first of all, would have to be involved. And China itself, because China is really the only support of North Korea. And having a disaster right next to them is not helping China.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to have to be a lot of different factors.
Yes. And please give the South Koreans fighting with them some encouraging things that they can refer to.
Yes. Well, I think the story of South Korea is so inspiring. And I remember as a child, my first knowledge about the word Korea was always because I was born after the Korean War, and we would hear about the orphans and the hungry orphans,
Yeah.
and so it was always a picture of this terrible, this poor country, and then little by little, things start to develop, both politically and economically. I mean, politically there were the hard times with the dictators there, but they were also very good human rights workers. One of whom I knew personally, Chae Sung-il, and so eventually that dictatorship fell after Park Chung-hee was assassinated.
Yes.
And democracy, I remember No Tae-woo, I believe, and some of the early leaders of the 80s, and by the end of that time you started to have even the dissidents were running for office, like Kim Dae-jung. And so that's very inspiring, and now it's a very, I think, vibrant democratic country. And also, at that time, what was once a poor country, because I think after North and South were split, the South part was very poor, but they have worked hard and built a very strong and prosperous country. I mean, the Olympics were held in 1988 in Seoul, which is a very important prize. Of course, we all use the technology, and I have my Samsung phone, and that's a huge company, and Hyundai and Kia, and your airlines I love it very much. I thought it was one of the best trips I ever took was on KAL, and of course now the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is Korean, so South Korea has arrived, and I think that probably is also one thing that gets North Korea angry, because they see how successful the South is, and the leaders take it out on their people, but that will end. That will end, and hopefully soon, and without bloodshed. That's my great hope.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you. Would you simply explain your current scholarly concerns or plans?
My current plans,
Yes.
scholarly plans. Well, I need to finish up some of my work on the Stalin terror in Leningrad. And so I've published a number of articles, and I want to finish it up into a book. And then maybe I'll continue working on, start some new work on perhaps the Holocaust in the Soviet Union. So not very cheerful topics.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for your good answers and advice for Koreans. I believe that your advice encouraged many Koreans to accomplish peaceful reunification between South and North Korea. I appreciate your precious time again. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for coming here. We are very happy that you've come to our university and to the United States.
Thank you.